All right, today is January 10th, 2023. My name is Dr. Jason Higgins. I'm a historian at Virginia Tech. Today I'm in Blacksburg, Virginia. Joining me remotely from his home and is it Wyncote?
In Wyncote, Pennsylvania, right across the line from Philadelphia.
All right, can you pronounce your name for me?
Yes, Ari Sesu Merretazon, first, middle, and last name.
And do you mind if I call you Ari?
I love it. That's my name.
All right, and you're formerly known as Haywood Kirkland.
That's my birth name, Haywood Thomas Kirkland.
Haywood Thomas Kirkland. And you're a Vietnam veteran, you're a formerly incarcerated veteran, and you're an activist for justice. Is that correct?
I accept all three. Yes, sir.
And do I have your permission to record this interview?
You do have my permission to record the interview.
Excellent. And for the purposes of this interview, we're going to be doing multiple recordings. We're going to do several oral history interviews as part of a memoir project, all right?
Mm-hmm.
And for this episode, I think we should start from the beginning. We'll start with when and where you were born, what it was like growing up there, and we'll probably make it to your path toward the military. Does that sound good?
That sounds good to me. I'm going to follow your lead, Jason.
All right. So, can you tell me when and where you were born?
Yes, I was born in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, to the union of Curtis and Sarah Kirkland. And 1947, August 23rd, 1947, for the record.
And where did you grow up?
I grew up in Washington, D.C.
What was the neighborhood like?
Well, look, I lived, before going into the military, I lived on 15th and East Capitol, meaning that if you go to that intersection, you can see the Capitol, and you can see my high school I went to, Eastern High School and D.C. Stadium. So that located my area of influence during while I was coming up, right? And it was a fantastic growth and development. And basically, high school was good to me, right? I graduated, right? And but when I was around like 10, Jason, I used to always sit because at the corner of 15th East Capitol, there was a Capitol East Businessmen Association. And their rear door had a little two stairs to step into the rear door. And when I was about 10, I used to always sit on that step because my house was like five units down, on the same block. I just come out early in the morning, sit on the step, sit on the stoop, as I would call it, and just reflect, man. Reflect on my family. I'm 7 of 8 boys and 2 girls,
So you're one of the younger siblings.
Yes. I'm the 7th son. And there's one younger than me, and I have 2 remaining sisters, Lee and Dee. They are both in Washington, D.C. And so coming up to really connect, it was a bit of a good time, always, leading, doing something, getting the crew together. We go do something that's good and helpful for us. And so after high school, I'm making a big jump. After high school, I received my notice to go into the military.
Well, let's slow down. And could you tell me about your parents? What did they do?
My parents, my father was a chef at one of the major restaurants, a couple of major restaurants in D.C. My mother was a housewife of 10 children, right? So
that's a hard life too.
Yeah, they come on somebody, but top soldier she was, My father as well. They were a union from time they was married to death,
When did they pass away, if you don't mind me asking?
At different years, right? And I can't recall straight up off which years was which right now. So we can.
Okay.
They all passed. Let's see, this 2020. They all passed before. Both passed before the change of the decade.
Okay, in the 90s. Okay. So your father was a chef.
Yes.
Would you describe your family, your upbringing as middle class or lower working class? What would you describe yourself as?
Middle class.
Okay.
According to the neighborhood, middle class, And I met my father and mother, they worked hard every day. And then, when my older siblings, got of age to do something, everybody worked. Wasn't not even a question. So we were pretty much, comfortable with 8 and 10. And it depends on who leaves the house in a given year.
Okay.
But I had go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Did you have a large extended family, uncles and
Oh man,
aunts?
let me tell you this. Let me how to set that up. 2 brothers married 2 sisters. But now, isn't that powerful? That's powerful to me. 2 brothers married 2 sisters, from North Carolina, right? The brothers from South Carolina, the 2 sisters from North Carolina. Well, I may have it reversed, but it doesn't matter. But they got together, and they remained a union until death.
Wow. And do you know much about your family's history before your parents, your grandparents? Where are they from?
I have the whole book, but I don't have it in front of me. I have to rely on references for the long, deep recall, right? But I have a family book. I might be right next to me for a minute, but I have to get away from the mic.
We can always come back to that later. I was just
come back to it
curious
later.
if you knew much
I like to
about that.
lift them up as well, and I have everything I need to do so, but it's not in front of me.
And do you know if there's any family history of military service in your family?
Oh yes, one of my twin brothers, Cornell Kirkland. He had his twin was Vernell Kirkland. Cornell joined the military and was a 30-year, vet, 30-year military man, and spent most of his time in Alaska and Seattle, Washington.
What eras? Would that have been the Cold War era, Korean War, World War II?
Korean. He went in just before, right in during I guess that Korean era. The era, yeah.
Did that have any kind of influence on you?
Yeah, because he was my model, man. That was the brother I always looked up to.
Okay.
I mean, even before he joined the military, right? He was my guide. And so I did look up to him very much so. And his spirit guides me now. I had the opportunity to funeralize him in Seattle, Washington, because that's where he was stationed at, for over 30 years between Alaska and Seattle, Washington. So it's Cornell Kirkland, Vernell Kirkland, and those are my definite guides in my family.
Okay.
For the way the principle that I lived through.
All right. And what was school like for you growing up?
School was good. I mean, I attended school every day, loved school, especially when I got into 10th high school. And I was part of the first class of Eastern High that started at 9th grade. And prior to that, I was at Elliott Junior High, which was like 2 blocks away. And it was a good time, man. It was just regular stuff. And that's when I really grew up, because I went from junior high straight into a high school in 9th grade. And all the sisters were there, the brothers was there, the whole athletic thing was going on. And so I really appreciated the environment at the time.
Did you play any sports yourself?
Only sandlot. I have a sandlot history of being a quarterback. But no, I've never played any type of professional sports, college sports, anything like that on that level.
Was college education ever expected from you?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, if anybody was in the family, expected it from me.
Okay.
My family from the top down, from my father down to my mother, all the way down to my siblings, they all looked at and valued me. They all made me understand that I was a special to the family. And they all protected me in their own way, They all educated me in their own way. So that was a good bond. That's all I can say about it. It was a very good family bond. It was tight. And one of the things about it, that at the time, there was a lot of stair-step families. There was a lot of young boys my age growing up with me. At the same time, their brothers growing up with my brothers, and et cetera. Everybody, family was stair-step. So it was a nice, tight community for us, for that group of 4 families,
Okay. What year did you graduate from high school?
1965.
That's an important time in American history. Were there any major national events that you can recall from that time that were particularly memorable?
Not specifically, Jason. I will have to, search my memory and make a note of it and come back to it and recall.
For example, do you remember Kennedy's
Yeah, oh
assassination?
yeah, 1963, absolutely. In fact, I recall myself walking. At that time, I lived at 1436 Independence Avenue, right, southeast. I can look up both ways. On my left, I can see the D.C. Stadium. On my right, I can see Capitol Hill, and we was right in the midst of that. And so it was a very good time for me and my family. Never wanted for a thing. Everybody worked. Everybody loved each other. In fact, my father, Curtis Kirkland, he was really known in the community as Daddy Kirk because he would always bring the food during the weekend, the summertime, right? Big layouts and stuff like that. So, and he was a professional chef. And another great memory of mine is going to school, elementary school, and running back home for lunch. Myself, my brother, and my sister. Hawath is my brother I'm referencing, myself, and Lee, my sister. We was all in the same elementary school at the same time. And we loved to come home for lunch because Dad had it laid out for us deep and long.
Right on. I'm curious about your memories of any civil rights protests during that time. I know the 1963 March on Washington happened.
Yes, for sure.
You must have been in the 10th grade. Do you recall that? Did you
Yes, I do.
participate?
I recall Kennedy's assassination. I can recall where I was for that. I was walking down the street on the corner at the intersection of 15th and Independence Avenue, right? For Independence intersection. And I was at the drugstore, and that's when I heard the news, And everybody got up in a little, got a little unsettled in the community at the time. It was a middle-class community. They were unsettled. The community was unsettled. Everybody got out, come out the houses and stuff like that, So yeah, I recall that particular because how the neighborhood responded to it,
Right. Did your family, your brothers, or your father, your parents, did they ever participate in any civil rights organizations or marches?
Not that I know, but my father was an angry man, and I know that, and I know that he supported any type of protests that would raise the level of our peoplehood. But he was busy taking care of his family, man.
Right.
He had 8 hungry sons that ate everything, and then the 2 sisters, And
Right.
so what I remember about that relationship, that we loved our sisters, and we had a fence of protection around them. And anytime anybody had to come knock on the door, they had to come through us first, Anytime that we know of a relationship even getting started, they had to come through the brothers first, And they knew that, so we was very well respected family there.
What did you do after high school? Did you work? Did you have a job?
Yeah, I worked with my oldest brother, Willie, and he worked at the district news company. In fact, I was working there I think I was starting in the 11th grade with him every summer, I was a stockman. I would go in, grab the books necessary, and get on the truck, and ride with him, go pick up the old books and shelve the new books, And so, yes, that was my major job that I had that I really looked forward to going to all the time. And at the time, I think I may have been working there at the time. I can't recall exactly. But I was always with Steve. We call him Steve, but his name is Willie. And it's, that type of thing. But I always enjoyed being with him.
Okay. And I understand that you were drafted in 1967. Is that correct?
Not exactly. 1966.
Okay.
I spent 2 years in the military, 66 to 68.
All right. Can you talk about what that was like? What did you do whenever you received the notice? Did you have a conversation with your parents? What did that feel like?
Well, my first conversation with my brothers, and all of them was encouraging me not to go. I said, man, but this is a draft notice. It's not like I'm deciding to go myself. I said, it's a draft notice, man. Who's going to get me out of jail? That type of thing. And so I went. In fact, I always had an adventurous nature. In fact, another neighborhood friend of mine, we had made a little compact that we both were going to the military together. And then and at some point I got I said, no, I think I'm not going to join. I'll wait for them to draft me. So he joined it, and I got drafted.
What was his name? Do you remember?
Excuse me? Yeah,
Do you
Eric
remember
Phillips.
his name? Eric
Phillips.
Phillips. Okay. Um, do you recall any kind of reasons why your brothers discouraged you from joining the
Well,
military?
they was very discouraged about the relationship of this country to African Americans. I have come out kind of like a political house that we always talked about that. But we never did anything protest together. It was individual protests based on the age structure and that type of thing. But we was solid as a rock. It helped me to understand my environment at the time. You know, I may have mentioned to you too that when I was about 10 years old, Jason. In fact, I mentioned it in the first paragraph of the book Bloods, which is chapter 7, where my story is. I used to sit on the stoop, which was right behind the Capitol East Businessmen Association, which was right at the intersection of 15th East Capitol. And about 60 feet, there was a little two-step stoop. I would always come out, walk up to the street, sit there, and just reflect, because that was the end of the bus stop for one of the D.C. transit lines. And basically, I would get me a transfer and ride all around the city, because that was the end of the line. The transfer is still good. I ride. And so at that spot, that's where I received the revelation. I was going to war in prison. I think I was 10 years old at the time. And that was a very powerful revelation. You know, I just knew that those two things was going to happen. And so as we moved through, I decided not to. I kind of fought it for a minute because I didn't join with my partner. But nevertheless, the draft notice came and it said you shall report. You know, and I reported, and down to Fort Hollenberg in Baltimore, I think it was. And then from there to South Carolina, Fort Jackson, and from Fort Jackson, from all my infantry training, basic and AIT, to Vietnam, from South Carolina to Vietnam.
Now, whenever you got the draft notice, were you aware of the Vietnam War? Was that on your mind? Did you think that you would be sent?
Yes, I was aware of the Vietnam War, and I knew I was going to be sent. Because, Jason, I think I told you about, I hope I told you, because while I was sitting on that stoop, I had the vision of going to war in prison.
I did read that. I read that this morning as I was preparing for the interview. I have a copy here. And yeah, that was very interesting. So you had this kind of revelation that you would go to war and prison in your life.
In that order. And I didn't think I was doing anything to make it happen. You know, I was just living my life, you know.
So it wasn't a self-fulfilling prophecy.
That's right. There you go. Good one.
Okay. So you did your training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. What was that like? Do you remember much about the day you arrived, or how was it adjusting?
It was a good. It was arriving. You arrived as an individual to the fort, and then get your assignment, your company assignment, and then everything is collected from there. Everything is training, and I loved it because I was, I'm kind of adventurous guy. I loved the training. But what had happened was, I had an appendix issue. I had to get an appendix operation while I was there. And I think about a 5th or 6th week of basic training. So all my guys who was drafted all the way down on the East Coast or from the Northeast, they was gone, and I ended up with a bunch of Navy men in another basic training run. Another 9 weeks. And that was good, and I enjoyed that as one could. But being amongst men, you do what you have to do, right? And you enjoy being a man, right? So I enjoyed all those physical things of exercising and running and all those type of things, target practice. And then AIT was at the same Fort Jackson, South Carolina. And from there, I went from South Carolina to Vietnam. I was 19 when I hit Vietnam.
You were 19. I'm curious.
20.
So you grew up did you grow up in a black neighborhood in D.C.?
Yes, absolutely. For the record, for my friends who may end up watching this, 15th and East Capitol. That's all I have to say. Mm-hmm.
And was your experience in the military at South Carolina really your first interactions with white people, or did you interact with white people in school? Like, what was that like for you?
Consistent interaction was in the military. I mean, at home, every now and then, depends on what part of the city. We had, the white community in D.C. at the time was over across what we call Sousa Bridge, right? And if we want, there was an element of some type of that was the cross the line, I guess, the boundaries of whites and blacks in D.C. as I was coming up, but never had no issues around that. I mean, we understood the relationship, but I'm 10 on to 18, right? So I'm busy doing what the age group would do, running around, playing, having fun, chasing the women, playing a lot of pool, gambling, that type of thing.
Right. And what kind of relationships what were relationships like between black and white people in the military in 1966?
It was strained because that's when the action was happening. That was when the protest was going on. It was very strained, but silent in many ways, especially if actually in the training component of your experience in the military. So I'm in training. So all you can do is whatever they tell you to do in training, right? For the most part. So that's why I was into that mode of following those orders, competing with everybody that I was there with, because we was all men and we couldn't, we was competing against each other, although we didn't like it in many of the ways that most folks would like it, or those who would actually go ahead and join the military. So that wasn't even the issue. We just, did our thing, and I was assigned a MOS of 11B10, I think it was at the time. And that was a 106 recordless rifle. It's a 3-man operation: the driver, the gunner, and the loader, right? And we all made sure had to experience each one of those positions to the max,
Mm-hmm.
But, however, when going to Vietnam, there was no 106 recordless rifles in Vietnam in our unit until about maybe 4 months before because they pulled me out of the field when I had about 4 months left and brought me to headquarters company and to secure the headquarters company. And there's two 106 recordless rifles was there in front of the CP.
What was your occupation for the most part in Vietnam?
Infantry soldier, recon infantry soldier,
So going out into the bush.
Search, kill, and destroy. The bottom line, that's the rule. That's the concept that we was trained into. Right. Search, kill, and destroy.
How many people would have been on a typical mission in one of these search and destroy operations?
Right. We go out into the field as a unit, a platoon unit, which range from 24 to 28 men, right? But once we get out into the field, we separate into individual squads and we go in on our missions, right? And so I enjoyed that. Let me tell you a key thing about that, because when I got into Vietnam and I visualized, and I was assigned to a line company with 160 men in the 1st Cavalry Division, right? And I always vision myself, I'm not going to charge no hill. Somebody just say charge the hill, that type of thing. And so anyway, things developed. A squad of the platoon, headquarters platoon, had gotten overran, killed, and they asked for some volunteers from the 1st Cavalry Division because we were sharing the same forward base camp. And I saw that as my opportunity to be an independent thinker again, because I'm not going to have, that we can at least discuss the issue before I charge that hill, you know what I mean? But being a line company, there's no discussion. You charge the hill. That's what the case may be. But in a recon unit, it's always planned out. It's search and destroy. That was our thing. And within that context, we ran into about 6 firefights, stuff like that. And I survived them all. And I talk about, I think, 2 in the book, 1 on the ground and 1 when I was doing the command post security with the 106 recordless rifle.
Okay.
Myself and another brother by the name of Johnson out of Florida.
So you were part of the 1st Air Cav, or you were operating with them?
Initially, I was with 1st Air Cav until we got the message that that the platoon unit in the 25th Infantry Division had gotten overrun. They were looking for volunteers from our unit because we were sharing the same base.
I see.
And I understood that's the best place for me. That was the best place for me because I figured that I could have some say-so or whether or not I charge the hill. In a line company, you don't have that say-so. You don't have that input, let me put it that way. They say charge that hill, you go up the hill. In a recon platoon and your individual squads, I was in a squad called, what was it? Tango. I was a Tango squad. Tango Whiskey X-ray, Tango Whiskey X-ray. I think maybe it's another one I can't bring up. But anyway, I was in Tango squad.
So let's take a step back for a minute, if you don't mind, Ari. So let's when were you shipped out to Vietnam? Do you remember the month?
Not the month. I remember it was summertime. So I ended up in Vietnam in, I think, May of 66.
1966. Okay. And how did you arrive? How did you get there?
I think we flew in. Yeah, by plane.
Okay. Do you know where you landed?
Yeah, first, I think we landed in Okinawa and then on to the Philippines, then on to Vietnam.
Okay.
And we landed in Pleiku, Vietnam. That was the Central Highlands, the largest military base at that time in Vietnam, United States military base. And that's where my feet first touched the ground in Vietnam was in Pleiku, Central Highlands.
What were your first impressions whenever you landed?
Hey, this is it. This is it, you know? And so that was it. You know, this is it. I'm here. I know that my goal was to survive for this 1 year tour of duty. And I did, but I did it in a very distinguished sort of way, you know? And that's the way you have to stay alive in any type of combat. You got to be aggressive. You just cannot be passive in many respects. But you know what's coming at you, and you defend yourself, you know?
And you said it was the summertime whenever you arrived? Yes. It must have been hot.
Oh, man, 110, 120, between 110 all the time. This is Central Highlands right there in the middle of the country and the jungle part of the country. So, yeah, it was very humidified there.
And did you join a group of men that were already out in the field?
Yes, I did, because I was a replacement. I was replacing for the 1st Cavalry Division, right? Mm-hmm. And then we was sharing the same base camp, and the word came down to our company that the 25th Infantry Division headquarters company recon platoon had gotten overran. They needed some volunteers. And I said, I'll go, right? With some thought in mind that it's better to have some say-so in the matter of life and death than to not. In a line company, you really don't have no say-so, you see? Right. And so I think I made this. I'm here today. I made the right decision, I say.
You mentioned that you had the mindset that you wanted to survive. You had 12 months of combat to survive in Vietnam. How did you mark that time? Did you keep a calendar or anything like that?
I kept the calendar, I think, when I was taken out of the field and assigned to the 106th Recorders Rifle in base camp in Da Nang, LZ Balding, in fact. So when I was assigned there, I knew I was going home completely. When I wasn't assigned, when I was out there in those boonies, I didn't know whether or not I was going home. I had to keep the faith that I was going home, right? And I had to fight at any time that it occurred, you know? But the beautiful thing about at that time, and dealing in the context of war, how can I say that's beautiful? But within the framework of my experience there, I think I did the right decision, because while we was in the platoon formation, our different squads went out in the field separately, right? Or we was out in the field separately, but knew where everyone was, right? Or were. And so that was good to me, because I had some input into whether or not we go anywhere, whether or not we do anything. You see, it wasn't no real chain of command. It's just respect from your platoon sergeant, from your lieutenant, your first or second lieutenant, and your platoon sergeant in all the different squads. There's just a lot of respect of being, we're in the war, we can't do nothing about it. We're going to do our thing and survive, and that's what we did.
Could you take me through a typical mission? Did you fly in a helicopter to a landing zone? Could you take me through any particular ones that you remember?
I cannot remember in very distinctly. I can talk to you generally, and maybe things will bubble up for me. Mm-hmm. But when we would go out in the field, we go out as a platoon, and each squad go on a separate mission, right? Keeping in contact with each other and all that type of stuff. And so that was and I just knew that I was going to survive that because I had some say-so. That it didn't sound right, then we had to talk about it, right? I mean, we didn't really do the rank thing. The lieutenant, except for one, when the first lieutenant was an our platoon, was a good guy. I mean, he was a reasonable, rational, military person who loved his soldiers, and he would not unnecessarily put us in danger. All right? But that's not the case of many first lieutenants. They come straight out of whatever military training and come right to the field. We're already out in the field, and they come out there trying to disrupt that pattern that we have. It creates a problem, And so we got to talk and tell them that we don't do this in this platoon. We don't do this is how we do it, rather. And we finally get a meeting of the minds, and everybody's comfortable, and there's no more, strain or misunderstanding between the men and the first lieutenant, the leader of our platoon. It was just a lot of respect. He took care of us. He looked after us. He made sure we didn't do nothing unnecessarily, right? And we all appreciated that. Mm-hmm. We saved each other,
Sure. And so you're talking about the difference between an effective leader and an ineffective, maybe an inexperienced leader. I've read a lot of accounts how in Vietnam, people who were unpopular as a leader or a commander or got people killed, they were threatened or
yeah.
Did you ever experience or remember anything like that?
Yes. In fact, the last lieutenant came out to our platoon to hit up our platoon. He was straight out from West Point or someplace, He got all the training up. And he wanted to come out and do his thing. I said, hey, man, we don't do it that way here, And this we talking through our platoon sergeant, because the platoon sergeant was to take the caretaker of us. He was in between the lieutenant and the men, right? And so men always related to the platoon sergeant, and we made sure the platoon sergeant understand that we're gonna survive out here. We're gonna protect each other. We're gonna show some blood love for each other, and we all gonna go home. And that's how we operate now. The dynamics of that, sometimes a lot of tension, sometimes not.
So on a recon mission, like you're describing, can you talk about the tactics, interactions with the enemy? Like what were some of the tactics used in an operation like that?
Well, let me just see if I can just process this out with my TBI going. We would get the mission from battalion headquarters, and we go out as a platoon. And about just as soon as we cleared the perimeter of the fire base, we go out as individual squads, right? To keep in constant contact with each other, So it very rarely did we function as a whole platoon, except when we actually was in a village or something like that, So I felt I carried look, when I first came there, they said, what you want? You're going to have to carry the machine gun or be on point. It was no real choice for me. I said, give me the gun. That was my attitude. Give me the gun. And that's what I did. I carried the gun for about 5 months, I believe, 5 or 6 months, something like that, before I was able to get my MOS operating on the 106 recoilless rifle, And so, it was that type of thing. You had to have that attitude of survival. If you felt that you wasn't going to survive, you're going on another side of things that you really hurting yourself. That you feel that you're not going to survive, you're in big trouble already, right? It's a state of mind.
Sure.
War is a state of mind, and your mind got to be right. You see, you got to be orientated to the war. You really can't be orientated to anything else. I'm not going to try to make it any deeper than that. You just had to be orientated to the war. I was 19 years old, man.
Can you talk about black soldiers, how they survived together? Was there solidarity among the men that you were with?
Yeah, that's the only way we survived was our solidarity. This was in the 60s, bro. We came home many times when some of our cities was on fire, and we came home together from the Northeast, from Maine on down to Maryland. Of course, Maryland. So, of course, that most of the black soldiers came out of, say, from Boston on down, right? So it was a nice, tight-knit of brothers that was there, that we came in on. We all was on the East Coast side things, except for when I got into basic, I got separated from them because I had an appendicitis problem, They got my appendix taken out and all that good stuff, got back in shape, and went back through basic and AIT training with some Navy folk, right? And so I'm in Vietnam now, and I'm just saying that I don't want to be in a line company. I mean, that was my vision, charred in the hill, and you don't have anything to do with, no input in the matter. That was just frightening to me, going somewhere just because somebody said so. You follow me?
Yeah, it sounds like you were a critical thinker in the film.
Yeah, I always said, oh man, good God. I've always been a critical thinker. I can think, let's start from 9 years old on up, And my family always valued me in a great sort of way, felt that I was very valuable to the family. And I really appreciated that family love, that blood love, And that got me through it because I then was prepared to deal with the adversities that I ran into in war, And I just defended myself and defended others with me, I didn't play no games. I was out in the field, and I know I had to have a field type of mind, state of mind. I could not have the state of mind that I don't want to be out there. Because where could you go?
Right.
Nowhere for you to go. If you have that state of mind, sometimes the issue get so strained with a person that they don't fight back and all that type of stuff. They just go, I want to shoot the fingers off and things of that nature.
Now, I know that you have a traumatic brain injury, so your memory, there are some issues there, but do you remember any friends that you had in Vietnam? Any other names?
The main friend that I recall, a brother named Bobby Williams out of Philadelphia. We was boot to boot all the time with each other. We watched each other's back. We didn't let nobody, even our own men, mess with each other, that type of thing. Just protected each other. And Bobby Williams, I haven't found him yet. I live in Philadelphia now. And over the last 10 years, I was looking for him. I mean, seriously looking for him and demanding the city also look for him. Yes, so young brother, we pretty much went out in the field at the same time. And he was the point man. Bobby was the point man. I was the machine gunner, right? At the time, I think Bobby was from Philly. I was from D.C. I don't know whether or not Bobby survived or not, mainly because when I came back to Philly, my job was to find Bobby Williams. And I couldn't find him. There was no record in the city of his death or any of his locations and whatnot. So I don't know. But I made a major effort in the city of Philadelphia to find him, to the point that I sued the city because they did not have a veterans grave registration record. I said, Bobby's not, and I was a pretty public, kind of quasi-public person in Philly because of my advocacy, right, for veterans and reparations. And so, I pressed the city to, look, the law requires the city to have what they call a veterans grave registration record. That is all the veterans, funeral home that funeralized them and where they was buried. The city of Philadelphia did not have one. They hadn't had one in 69 years, man. We sued them, and the court forced them to set up a Veterans Affairs office. Unbelievable, right? This was in 2010. The record showed they never even thought about setting up a Veterans Affairs office, although they had one city council person that, quote unquote, handled Veterans Affairs. And that was like, kind of like almost like under the table. Because there's no Veterans Affairs office, nothing, was nothing. Veterans Affairs was not a part of the administrative, the executive infrastructure of the city, which it should have been. It was tied down, bogged down, locked down in the office of the president of the city council. You see, we shook it loose with a lot of our advocacy and our lawsuit, and they end up putting the name of Veterans Affairs Office on a door in the city, in City Hall. But as of this date now, they do not have a director of Veterans Affairs. You see? And that's the issue. Right. So that's a live issue for me today. It's a live issue. I'm dealing with it today based on all the other things I'm dealing with, right? Because our organization that was actually, engaged the city on that question was called Point Man Soldier's Heart Ministry. I was the chief of staff. James Abram was the president. He and I was the leader of the ministry. And our first thing was to engage in the city to make sure they get it right. At least have the administrative infrastructure together where people knew that there was a Veterans Affairs office, they can get this type of help or that type of help, that type of thing. Be the first port of contact for the veterans of the city. There was none, all right, until 2012, all right? So what happened to all the money, Jason? You have an idea what happened to the money that's supposed to come down from the federal government to the state government to the city? Nobody really knows because there was no infrastructure. A permanent Veterans Affairs was never, and it's probably still not, a part of the administrative infrastructure of the city of Philadelphia. It's just it's an office ran by and monitored by the president of the city council. His name is Darrell Clark. And something's wrong with that. He's not a veteran, you know. His staff, none of his staff members are veterans. We actually was able to get a veteran, a lieutenant who was, I think he was doing what you call it when you come out of the military, then you go to some other type of branch of the military. He's doing that stateside stuff, and so we got him in there. But lo and behold, about 6 months, maybe a year later, he was gone. Because it's controlled by the president of the city council, Darrell Clark, and something's wrong with that. It should be under the office of the mayor as a solid infrastructure of the city of Philadelphia. It is not. It floats out there between, under the jurisdiction and supervision of the president of the city council.
So I want to keep this interview chronological. I'm very interested in your activism and how you've gotten involved in Veterans Affairs and everything. But to take a step back, I'm curious, how did soldiers at war bond together and support one another in the field?
I could only speak for black veterans or black soldiers, because you know, we all go our own way after the battle. You see. And so we all stay together. The white soldiers stay with the white soldiers, black soldiers stay with black soldiers. And let me, on that point, 95% of the stockade in Vietnam was black soldiers. Go figure that one out, right? 95%, you see? And so we all knew, that's where that blood love came from, that we had to fight two wars, Jason. We had to fight the Viet Cong, the North Vietnamese, and we had to fight our own system, the racism in the military, which at that time they all denied.
Did you ever witness or experience arbitrary punishment against black troops from white officers for anything that you remember specifically? Not
so much punishment, because you had to be in that system to understand the issue and then the punishment. But in the field, yes, I've seen how black soldiers, white soldiers favored over black soldiers out in the field, right? And so, you know, it's sometimes it's nuanced and sometimes it's straight up. You know, y'all black folks over there, y'all gonna do this type of stuff. Now, good example. We would come back in out of the field, and they would assign the burning of waste, human waste, to us who come out of the field. And our platoon was like 85% brothers, you know? And so, you know, we pushed back on that. We pushed back on saying that, look, We the combat soldiers, we out in the field, we coming back into base camp, we ain't doing no jobs. We were resting and recuperating from the strain and rigors of war. Now, a lot of brothers didn't take that position, but a few of us did. I was amongst them. And that seemed to, be acknowledged and respected because that we engaged them. We just didn't accept it, And so that's where the whole concept of bloods come from, that blood love we had for each other within that context of fighting two wars, Vietnamese and the racism in the military in combat, which is different from racism in the military back at home. Racism in the military has to deal with straight up life and death assignments, you see? And had to deal with the love of the platoon leader, the lieutenant, for his platoon. If you didn't have a platoon leader that didn't love his men, that his job was to keep us alive, then he was the wrong guy. They don't last. The opposite of that didn't last long in the field. Because, it's no rank there in the field, man. We trying to protect each other to survive. And we do the best thing under the circumstances. And if one of us had the best idea, then that's how we roll. Of course, it's challenged throughout the network, throughout the platoon and the squads and whatnot. But everybody agree on something, then we roll that way. And so that's how we kept the tension down.
Right. You mentioned some forms of resistance to unfair commands, like assignments in the rear whenever you come back from the field. But I'm curious about the culture. Can you talk a little bit about culture among Black soldiers in Vietnam? What music were you listening to?
We was listening to the music. We would listen to our music. If we come in out of the field for rest and recuperation, it usually lasts 3 to 5 days. It depends on what's up. And that's what we do. We would actually, get together, bond, talk about the world. Talk about the world when we was in it, and talk about the world when we will return. And that was the best part, because that kept us looking towards the world, getting out, coming, going home, So we enjoyed it. There was a lot of crying going on sometimes. A lot of crying going on, especially when you get into those relationships, male-female relationships, brothers, dear Johns and all that type of stuff. And then just the strain of being away from your loved ones. You need some blood love to contend with that, and also at the same time to contend with the racism in the military,
right,
and the war. So that was a major strain environment for us. But we the Bloods, man, and so we took that attitude that we're going to be the best of what we can do. We're going to make sure that each one of us get home at all costs, and pretty much it worked that way in terms of brothers I was in my squad. I think we all got home. Some got injured, some just, didn't make it. 1 or 2 didn't make it, but most of us got home.
Was there any kind of solidarity or sympathy for the Vietnamese people between Black soldiers in Vietnam?
Oh, yeah. The Vietnamese people themselves made sure that occurred. I mean, the Vietnamese people engaged us, We engaged them because we same. In the context of power structures in this country, right? In our country, in the world, rather. So we were same. That's how we dealt with that. We gravitated towards them. They gravitated towards us just because they considered us same. Just basic people, poor people that don't have no really input in decision making, that type of thing. And just dealing with their daily affairs. We turned their country into a major war zone, man. That means village by village. We went and burned hooches, and things like that. That was a major mission: search, kill, and destroy. And that's the attitude you had to have. If you didn't have the attitude and you're out there, it's reasonable assurance that something bad is going to happen to you, and that is of your own making, because you're not ready. And so we had to think we always ready, always ready.
So you're describing kind of like this kill or be killed mentality that soldiers
this is war,
had.
man. Exactly. That's what it was. That's exactly what it was. Now, there's no other way to structure that. It was kill or be killed. Because when they say you go into the village, charge into those villages after we chase a VC into the village, usually all hell breaks out. you know? And a couple of times he did. And on one occasion, my squad got caught right up in the middle of it, you know? And let's see, 1, 2, 3. And 3 of us didn't survive, right? And then one just didn't have the courage at the time to fight. And it was bad because I knew him when I was back in the world, because we was on different football teams. He was at the Stonewalls, I was the Romans up in, he was down more southeast, I was northeast in D.C. So I knew him. I was aware of him while, and in fact, his wife, we was in the same class, we went to the same school together. And but we was out in that field, man, and if you ain't ready all the time, if you're not all ready all the time, subject to strain of war, strength is subject to overtake you. To the extent that a person, you want to throw away your weapon now. You want to give up, that type of stuff. Unbelievable, but that's the strain of war. And there's a lot of stories like that, not just black men. I mean, look, I had one white guy in my platoon. He was so scared. He said, I can't take it anymore. And he shot off his finger. Shot off his middle finger to go home. It was that type of dynamic, that type of environment there. Everybody's goal was to go home any way they can, except in a body bag.
In the middle of trying to survive a war, did you form opinions about the rightness or the wrongness of the Vietnam War?
Yes, I did. I formed it while I was in Vietnam. I was just a young 19-year-old gung-ho guy, wanted to keep up with everybody, compete with everybody. But in Vietnam, that was a whole different thing, man. It was just like, we going home. We got to make sure that we go home. That's our goal, is protect each other so we can go home, back to the world, we would say. We'd come in out the field sometime. All the things that we talked about when we came back off a mission was talk about what we were going to do when we got back in the world. Because we knew the dynamic in Vietnam between black and white soldiers. The racial divide was very clear. I think I might have mentioned to you, and I'm not to be repetitive, but 95% of the stockade in Vietnam was black soldiers. We call it LBJ because Lyndon Baines Johnson was the president at the time. We call it LBJ. And in fact, it was in a little part of the Vietnam called Long Binh. So we called it Long Binh Jail. That was the stockade. 95% black soldiers.
Were there any specific memories of any times at war whenever you realized that what you were being told about the war didn't match up with what you were seeing or experiencing? Can you talk about that?
All the time, the issue of the high command in war is to get the soldiers charged to heal, right? And so within that dynamic, a lot of things occur down on the ground when you're in a platoon, right? And so right there, you better have a better shot at developing a blood bond with each other. That's where the whole concept of bloods come from. That came from Vietnam. It didn't come off the street. It came from Vietnam. When they got to the street, the United States government put a whole lot of drugs into those cities, to the major black cities, to break that love bond, to break the blood love bond. That means willingness to die for each other. And they broke it. You can see it. You can see it all day long. But that's the type of attitude. That's how Vietnam educated me. I wasn't political at all before I went to Vietnam. I was competitive, I was kind of like gun-ho until I hit Vietnam. Then I saw the deal, the life and death situation within company commands. And I said, I'm not going to be, I don't know who I told, but I told one of them, I said, look, I'm not going to no line company, man. And lo and behold, the word came down that the recon platoon, I was in the 1st Cav at the time, that the recon platoon of the 25th Infantry Division got overran, and they looking for volunteers. We all sharing the same base camp, so, we was the first opportunity. And I said, I'll go. Brother said I was crazy. Some said I was crazy, but I said I'd go because I understood that I would have some chance for some input into what I would do, where I would go, how I would do it, And we bonded from the first lieutenant on down. We bonded. We took care of it. Our job was to take care of each other and make sure we got home whole, physically and spiritually.
Sure.
And so it was that type of experience for me, man. It was that type of experience for me because just imagine, 19 years old, out in the field, you come back in the field, and first thing you do is trying to find another brother. I mean, that's just the natural order of things, man. And so, we found each other. I mean, in fact, when we come out of the field, we always look for the brothers who were handling the supplies and brothers who was in the kitchen, because those two basic things that we needed all the time. And they used to take care of us, man. They used to take care of us. They showed some blood love to us. They knew we was in the field. So when we came back to base camp, they showed the love. They showed the blood love. Make sure we had whatever we needed.
You've mentioned a couple of times about how soldiers would come back from the field and talk about plans for getting out, going back to the world. What was your plans? Do you remember what you had planned to do after getting out of Vietnam?
Yeah, very simple. I was going home to fight my war, fight our war, my people's war. That's how Vietnam politicized me. Because before then, I was just thinking about being an athlete, thinking about just running the sisters, and being with the girls and that type of thing. Doing what 19-year-olds do. But when I got to Vietnam, man, it was my critical thinking was clear that what was going on to me. And I allowed my faith in myself, or how I'm going to deal with things, to take over and keep me alive. And that's what it did. I'm here to testify to it.
Dr. King spoke out against the war publicly in 1967. Do you remember that? Do you remember hearing about Dr. King's views on the war?
Yes, indeed. Out in the field, man, because the word comes out into the field. Like different units go back to base camp, they rest up, and then next thing you know, you crossing paths out in the field and whatnot, and you share a word with another brother with another company. We find out. And then they had the little Stars and Stripes newspaper that floated out in the field. I mean, what we going to do reading a newspaper like that out in the field? We didn't care nothing about the Stars and Stripes newspaper. We want to talk about something about going home. We want to talk about the world. And that's what we did. When we came out in the field, we talked about the world. We talked about our families, our girlfriends, our partners, our boys, our neighborhood, that type of thing. That's what we did. That's what bonded us. And Wallace Cherry, the author of Bloods, he captured that in the book Bloods, an oral history of the Vietnam War told by Black veterans. In fact, he served 2 terms over there. Him and his wife, Janice.
Since you mentioned Wallace Terry, I'm curious, when did you actually do the interview with Terry? Do you remember that?
Let's see. Before I left D.C., so it must have been, and left D.C. in 84. Left D.C. in 84? I'm not sure. But give me the question again. I'm sorry about that, man.
Well, I was just trying to get a general sense of when you did the interviews with Wallace Terry. Was it
sometime
in the
before?
80s?
Yeah, in the 80s. There you go. Thank you. And the book came out in 85. Thank you very much. Yeah, in the 80s.
Do you feel like Wallace Terry captured your experiences accurately?
As best as he could, because he had to fight a lot of situations in getting that book published. Like almost a couple of paychecks from being on the street, from the mortgage being due and that type of thing. Couldn't pay the gardener anymore, that type of thing. And he's a professional man, and he did his thing for us. And he saw what was happening. He saw that blood love in the field that nobody wanted to touch, nobody wanted to talk about. But it was there in plain view. We knew it, the brothers knew it, and the others knew it. And they just let it flow so that it won't be any more tension. They tried to, come to command was like, let it flow. Everybody has the right to believe and love their people, and that let it flow. But that's where the whole concept of Bloods come from, Vietnam. I want the young folks to hear that, understand that. It wasn't about killing each other or developing some type of adversarial relationship with each other. It's about protecting each other, respecting each other, and loving each other in war to make sure you love each other enough to make sure you'll fight for that guy, that you'll fight for your war buddy, you see? If you're not there and you cannot depend on the person that next to you, that's a problem. It's a big problem. And so we developed that blood and love to get us out there for us to withstand soldiers fighting 2 wars. One in the military, one in the field, and one in the military. Racism in the military, to be clear.
So I'd like to transition to coming back from Vietnam at this point. Can you remember what it was like coming home? What was that experience like for you?
It was traumatic for me. It was traumatic. Because when I came home, D.C. was on fire based on the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, May 1968. And that's the month I came home. And man, I couldn't handle it, tell you the truth. I said, look, Mom, look, Dad, y'all gonna have to hold me up in here for a while, for about another 30 days, because I cannot deal with what I'm seeing out there. I don't want to get involved with that. I need some more peace. I need a place of peace. So that first 60 days at home for me was like awesome. You know, with my mom, with my children, with family, and they took care of me. And so as I moved away from returning and whatnot, I got involved. Ever since I come from Vietnam, I've been involved with Veterans Affairs. I've been an advocate for Veterans Affairs, a frontline advocate. And the record shows that I was there in terms of the rights of Vietnam veterans, especially in terms of PTSD. It wasn't even the military diagnostic manual when I came home.
Did you experience any kind of psychological problems whenever you came home?
Sure, I did. Of course, I couldn't acknowledge it, or didn't really been able to define it, but I'm sure I did. But my thing was I have a big heart. I have a big love for my people. And so my thing was always helping somebody else and being criticized by it in many respects by other friends, but in some parts of the family. But that just that's how God made me, and that's what I do. I try to serve and defend, you see? And so that's what was driving me when I came home. And that's what we talked about in our huddles together in base camp out in the field, what we was going to do when we got home.
So you wanted to serve your community when you got back home.
That was a commitment that a few of us made to each other, And for sure, I know Bobby Williams, Philadelphia, that was one of the brothers that we made it to. That's why I was so aggressive in trying to find whether or not he was still alive in Philadelphia, where he is with his family. Oh my God! Let's move on to the next piece, because that's a blood love event there. I couldn't find him, but he's dead. I was told by a lieutenant that I bumped into, because he knew Bobby Williams, and that's what he said. He said, "Yeah, Bobby died of an overdose." That could mean anything to me, but I didn't assign drugs to it.
So whenever you flew home from Vietnam, were you still part of the military?
Yeah.
Did you have to
I had 90 days
finish
left. I had 90 days left in country. Assigned. I got 30-day leave before I report to my next duty station, which was Fort Carson, Colorado. And I promised myself I wasn't doing nothing military in those 90 days. And I worked with them, man. I would fall out in rough, dry, wrinkle fatigues, no patches on me on my uniform or anything like that. Ho Chi Minh sandals on, some shades, and a big hat. The only reason it was a big hat, big military army hat, they made me cut my bush. That was a struggle, but I cut my hair. The alternative was, a little restrictive,
So you had grown out your hair while in Vietnam?
Yeah, I let it grow. Everything grow. I've had locks before, back when I was after I came home, right? Yeah, after I came home and in prison. But anyhow, I don't know where I was, Jason. Connect me again.
So we were talking about coming home. You were still in the military. You had to finish your enlistment. At what point were you in the military whenever King was shot and killed in Memphis?
Yes, I was in the military.
You were still in the military?
I was in Vietnam. What was 67, 68?
So King was killed in April of 1968.
There you go. I came home in May 1968, and D.C. was on fire. All right? It was a war zone I walked into, right? Without a weapon. So my family took care of me until I got back into the professional world, and the city of D.C. offered me a job as a police officer, or I had a choice of going to work for the post office, which is now the International Trump Hotel, right? Trump International Hotel. I chose the post office. And that's where the dead president thing started, because I learned a lot about what was going on in the post office, how packages and money was shipped out of country, in country, and all that type of stuff. And so that started the whole deal.
Okay. Did you associate in your community as a veteran? Whenever you came back from Vietnam, did you identify as a veteran?
Nope. I identified myself as a veteran while I was in prison. Right. That was really the first time I really identified myself as a veteran and as an advocate for veterans. Was started in prison. Because the prison I was in at the time, I think it was Lord and Reformatory in Washington, D.C. no longer existed. The infamous Lord and Reformatory, by the way. And when I hit the Lord and Reformatory, that was cold-blooded crazy. And so that's where I stayed. Out of my 5.5 years in prison, in jail, then prison, I stayed in the hole for about a year and a half, right? And the last time I had a revelation about what I'm called to do in the world with my life, I was in the hole. You know? And I realized that I have a very high status, still have a very high status in society, being a combat veteran. That should be a very high status, right? A status wherein that you don't have to worry about anything else for the rest of your life. You can put your life on the line for this country. And all the things associated with your benefits are now turned into your property. So that's how I pursued my rights as a veteran while I was in prison. That was my property. I signed on the dotted line. I got to go get my property. And so I started advocating for my property. And then in order to make sure, it happens, I had to get some other veterans involved as well. So we set up what we call the Incarcerated Veterans Assistance Organization. And we went all the way to the White House with that. I mean,
and
literally.
To me, this is in many ways the most interesting part of your story is about. So the next segment of the interviews I think we should cover would be from coming home to D.C., trying to readjust from Vietnam.
Yes.
What got you involved in robbing the armored vehicle, the court, the trial, and then your experiences in prison, and building up to like organizing the Incarcerated Veterans Assistance Services.
I love to talk about that, Jason. Maybe that'd be the second interview, maybe?
I think so. I think so. For right now, we've gone about an hour and 15 minutes. I feel like this is a good moment where we could pause. We could decide if we want to continue, or we could schedule a second interview to talk about your experiences as an incarcerated veteran.
I want your opinion. What about the quality level of our interview? Based on
so far, it's so good. I think it would probably help things if we ended today and then scheduled a follow-up interview tomorrow if you're available.
Tomorrow's Wednesday. I'm available after 3:00.
All right, so I'm going to pause the interview for today, but before so we're still recording. Is there anything throughout the interview from your time in Vietnam that you want to talk about that I didn't think to ask, or something that you wanted to go back to?
Not really in Vietnam. Vietnam is an easy concept for hopefully for folks to digest. We was in war, and we was a war attitude. Everybody had to have that attitude. I had an attitude of surviving, and I talked that talk. And on my steel pot, Jason, when I was back at home, they used to call me the kid, right? And I had the kid on the back of my helmet and in the front of my helmet, and on each side I had keep the faith. I don't know what I had on the other side, but maybe that's what I had on both sides, but I'd rethink that. But anyhow, the point is I had God on my helmet, man. I had my faith that drove me through that I was faithful, that I was going to survive it, that I was going to do everything I needed to do to survive it. And that's the key thing. You just can't have faith and expect something to fall out of the sky for you. You got to know that you got to do something to make that faith materialize, that product materialize based on faith. In this case, it was my survival. And that's what I did.
Well, you mentioned your nickname, the Kid, and that's what's used in Bloods. And we had talked privately about how reading your story in Bloods is what really inspired me to pursue a dissertation, a Ph.D. in history, and to write a book on incarcerated veterans.
Pursue a Ph.D.? not to do. I'm gonna make a decision not to do this interview, but to pursue a PhD.
So whenever I first read Bloods, I was in a master's program in English, and I was starting to get interested more and more in interviewing veterans, but I didn't know at that time that I wanted to do a PhD in history and write a dissertation on incarcerated veterans, but was reading your account in Bloods and your work organizing incarcerated veterans that made me realize that that was a book project on incarcerated veterans, the history of incarcerated veterans since Vietnam. And so I did a PhD in history to pursue that topic, and that's what I wrote my dissertation on. But I looked you up and I tried to find you everywhere, but I was looking for Haywood Kirkland.
Yeah,
And
I am
so
now Ari Merretazon.
can you talk about that decision?
Yeah, man, I
What
can.
made you decide to change your name, and when was that?
Well, it's just all a matter of acknowledging who you are and appreciating that and respecting that and holding it high. I'm sure you hold your cultural references high and they're close to your heart. And that's what I did. And so in that process, while in the hole, I realized that I had become another person. I realized what I had to do to get out of prison without doing 30 years, which I was sentenced to, 10 to 30 years. So I had a lot of thinking, a lot of critical thinking to do. And so while in the hole, I realized, man, I'm a Vietnam veteran here. There's nothing in this prison around Vietnam veteran. I said, that's what I want to do. I said, exactly what I want to do. I want to set up a Vietnam. And at the time in D.C., they had this inmate program concept was really flowing. They would have inmates going in and out of prison, gospel choirs going out, play actors going out. They had a group called Inner Voices. They was like a group they do all types of plays and whatnot. They was going in and out of prison. And when I came out and saw that, I said, hey, veterans, we going in and out of this prison. And so I hooked up the Incarcerated Veterans Assistance Organization. And in the process, we had to struggle a little bit with the administration, but our status as veterans was overpowering. I made sure it was overpowering to them in their eyesight because I bridged the outside with the work I was doing on the inside at the highest levels. I mean, at office of the president, U.S. Congressman Ronald Dellums, and a few others that actually stepped up and worked directly with me as my outside coordinators while I was doing my inside work, And that's where I began to really understand what development is all about and relationship building is all about, those types of things, and pretty much became professional in it. And the organization reached the status in the prison where we pretty much ran our show because we had the United States government on our side in the identity of being a veteran.
So that's the story I really want you to tell in our next interview, and we can schedule that because I'm really fascinated. That's the story that needs to be recorded for history.
I think so too, man.
A quick question though: what does your name Ari, your full name, what does it mean?
It means, I hope you nod appropriately. It means guardian servant, chosen to do the will of the Creator.
So you go from the kid to the guardian servant.
Yeah. And as the kid, I was doing the same things at a different age, but, it was as a kid, But here, it was the same thing, trying to protect folk, protect my friends, be closer to them, that type of thing. And that's what I did. That's my nature.
So it's about service to
It's about service. There you go. Thank you, soldier. I'm a servant. Mm-hmm.
Well, Ari, I want to thank you for your time today, for answering all of my questions and your patience with the technology. I think now that we got that handled, the next interview will go a lot more smoothly. But again, thank you for reaching out to me and for the honor of interviewing you.
Let me reciprocate, Greco. This is important. Thank you for reaching out to me. If you met up with some of my colleagues, my veteran colleagues down at wherever you were at the time, because I think it was Richard and who else was that? Somebody else. I can't think of his name right now. But Richard Brookshire. Mm-hmm. And I think you communicated with him where y'all at some type of conference together around veterans, and he put me in contact with you and you me. And so I appreciate that, man. I appreciate that you was in the space because a lot of things going to happen with Black veterans still in this country. Because the issues haven't changed. It's just whether or not we understand them in a deeper sort of way than it was before. And I think that's what Richard already sued. I think sued the state of I can't recall, but he just filed a major lawsuit around. He sued the VA. That's what he did. Sued the VA. And so I sued the city of Philadelphia. You know, Ari Merretazon versus Philadelphia City Council. Check it out. And because probably for all the same issues, just did happen to be in a broader national perspective. Mine just dealing with the city of Philadelphia. You know.
So Richard Brookshire he's the leader of the Black Veterans Project.
Yeah, there's
and
another brother that's worked for the VA that's worked with him all the time. They're the leaders of that Black Veterans Project.
So we got connected because he had heard about my book that, I have a book called Service Denied. It's about veterans throughout American history who've been denied benefits and service and recognition. And I told him about my next book project on incarcerated veterans. And that's why he was like, you have to meet Ari. And that's the moment whenever I realized that you were actually the Haywood Kirkland that I've been looking for all along.
Yeah, I'm the same.
And you're the same person. So, I'm deeply in debt to Richard for introducing me to you. But again, I want to thank you, and I really look forward to scheduling our follow-up interview and hearing about your activism.
Yeah, I as well. And thank you for receiving and working on that word you received around your Veterans Project, Incarcerated Veterans Project. So thank you so much for following your heart and mind.